Morning, everyone, and welcome back to another day of our Safety Nights Heat Safety Summit. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Dan Abatoy. I handle operations here at Safety Nights. So with that being said, I'm going to toss my email down here in the chat. So if you have any questions about the summit, Safety Nights in general, just feel free to email me anytime, and I'll be able to answer any questions or help you with anything you might need help with. A couple housekeeping items before we jump in. One, if you have not received or have not verified your email through Crowdcast, please go ahead and do that. Until you do that, I believe the chat and some of the other features are going to be locked. So you'll see an email from Crowdcast. And I believe all you have to do is click a button. It's really simple. Two, if you have any questions for Chris at all during the session, feel free to toss them into the question chat. You'll find that located over in the right-hand side of your screen. It is a question mark icon. Click that, toss your question in there. And if you see a question that's already in there that really speaks to you, feel free to upvote that. It'll give us an indication as to how important and relevant that question is for everybody here today. So yeah, I guess having said that, I will turn the stage over to Chris, the person you are all actually here to see and hear from. Chris, the stage is all yours.
Come on, Dan. They're here to see you too, man. Um, well, first of all, thank you, Safety Nights, for putting this on. It really is a super cool event. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I know you guys have a million other things that you could be doing right now, but hopefully, I'm going to do you proud, and over these next few minutes, walk you through something that's hopefully interesting to you. Of course, you can see on the screen right there. We're SlateSafety. I'm currently what we call the VP of Growth at SlateSafety. That basically means that I help with the commercial efforts. So if anything I talk about is interesting to you, you can see that QR code right there on the screen. We do offer a free 30-day pilot. That's a fantastic example to kind of walk through and see if this technology, this idea, could work for you and you guys. And hopefully you guys enjoy it. So we're going to go ahead and get going. All right. So, we already got it. We already got a problem here. We're going to go back. Looks like we were already at you guys are going to see the slides in reverse real quick. So that's going to be fantastic. We're going to walk about a couple of case studies there. That's good. Let's get back. There we go. We're going to talk about some technology. We're going to talk about what you guys have been doing. Excellent. And then finally, here's the agenda. So first, we're going to cover the basics of heat stress. It wouldn't be a heat stress summit without talking about some of that stuff. We're going to walk through some of those common tools you guys have been using. And then we're going to get introduced to some of this new wearable technology you guys already got a little sneak preview of. We'll talk a little bit about I tried to encompass some of these questions that I normally get around this technology. So we'll talk a little bit about the sensor technology, also about this kind of IoT framework. I know some of you guys are interested in, and then we're going to look more towards this additional framework of deploying things like this in the field, some things that we see when we're deploying, and then also finally, of course, finishing out with some real world impact and how it's actually working. So hopefully that's the only hiccup we're going to have today. And we're going to jump right into it. So again, with this being a heat stress summit, you want to cover the basics. I didn't want to be the only guy getting up here and not having this information. This is information you guys probably already know, of course. With it being the end of March, a lot of people in the United States, specifically, you guys are starting to dust off the programs, starting to kind of look towards the summer. So these are just good reminders to kind of think about and carry forth to your team. But I wanted to highlight this. It's oftentimes something people kind of mention, but when we think about heat stress, this idea of heat stress is really the things that are making the heat rise, kind of an idea. So this goes into this takes into account those environmental conditions, those people that are out there in the in the facilities that are working, the different types of work that they're providing, but also the environmental conditions. Now the heat strain, that's going to actually be the response of an individual. It's the response to those conditions. And of course that response, you guys have seen this. I probably borrowed this from some OSHA website at some point. But you guys understand these kind of goes through from less severe to kind of the more severe. And kind of what we're trying to do, and what I'm going to try to hope to layer in as we talk today, is that there are different steps along the way, different indicators, and we want to try to provide those indicators to you guys, to your teams, so that we can solve these things on the lowest possible level. That's really the name of the game, and that's what we're going to try to do. All right, so here's another kind of refresher right here. You think about what are those things, what are those contributing factors to heat-related illnesses. Again, you can think about those environmental conditions, the environment that people are working in, the temperature, the humidity, the air movement, but also those individual indicators. Now, heat stress is actually really interesting because not only is it going to be different for those scenarios, it's going to be different for the people, of course, because everybody kind of brings their same history to work every day. But it's also going to differ day to day to those individuals depending on some of these indicators. So, like you guys know, the physical fitness, acclimatization, different any kind of prescriptions that people are using, anytime, caffeine, the alcohol use, those are all going to come and make an impact one way or another on that individual that's coming to work every day. So before we kind of talk about the snazzy new technology and wearables, oftentimes it's kind of nice to get a baseline. And I always think it's interesting because when we do things like this, when we go to trade shows, when we, are out in the community, talk to our customers, there's a lot of cool things that are happening. I know that some of the webinars I'm going to check out a little later, they have some ideas into how to help mitigate some of these. But oftentimes it's kind of the stuff that we've been using for a while. It's the stuff that we feel comfortable with out there. So you guys know these. I won't spend too much time on it, but just wanted to kind of bring them back. But the different elimination tactics, the different engineering controls, the administrative controls that are out there. These are things that kind of depending on your program, depending on what you guys are doing, your facility, your industry, you guys are going to kind of shade towards more or less of these. These are also the things, I got a couple pictures right here. You guys know these well. Water shade rest, that's basic. That's kind of ground level. We should all be doing that stuff. These are some other tools that you guys have probably seen out there. You guys are probably using some of these for sure. Military, the forearm submersion is definitely a big one that we've seen. And then over the past couple of years, we've definitely seen, of course, we're just more in tune with what's happening, but there has been an evolution in this technology space. We like to think that we're leading the pack for sure. But wearable technology, as we'll walk through a little bit more, this has been around for a little bit. So these are some tools. Some of you guys might have tested some of these tools kind of back in the day. There's a number of different tools that have kind of popped in and kind of gone out. But we're really at kind of we're really at an exciting time where a lot of these technologies, just like you guys know, in every aspect of your life, things are getting smaller, things are getting faster, things are getting cheaper for sure. So now you're seeing the miniaturization of some of these technologies come together. And oh, by the way, you're starting to see some combination of these different technologies. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what's new, what we're going to be highlighting here today. Of course, wearables is kind of the main focus. But when you think about wearables, that can mean a whole lot of things. And it's very frequent that we will have calls internal to SlateSafety where, people will hop on a call. They'll say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about, what you guys do. Hey, my boss told me to come check you guys out, that kind of stuff. And oftentimes when people think wearables, they think of the ones that you see in your consumer facing life. I'm wearing a Garmin watch right now. You just kind of naturally gravitate towards those. But this idea of wearables can mean a whole lot of different things. You can see here's just a funny little graphic that I picked up. This is it. I mean, if think everything's getting smarter, everything's getting more and more smaller. Like I said, you're starting to see it all pop up. We're starting to see more rings come online, which is interesting. Definitely the smart glasses. It feels like those have kind of started and installed a few times. Smart textiles is out there. Smart watches, of course, like I said, but really everything. Even some of these things that you're just kind of like, do we need to have a connected smart belt? I don't know, but stuff's out there. I'll talk a little bit more about IoT in a second, but as you guys walk through the aisles of whatever store that you're shopping for, every single appliance is now connected. It's just a super interesting time. But on today's webinar, the wearables that we're talking about, you can kind of think about them in this kind of hierarchy right here. Of course, we're talking about technology. Today, we're talking about this big bucket of wearables. But then underneath that, and this is a good distinction right here, we're going to be talking more about safety wearables. And again, this is something that we see a lot in our business, where people might be thinking about deploying a lot of Fitbits or a lot of polar solutions, a lot of these fitness-focused tools. And of course, it's just like any other tool, right? You want to get the right tool for the right job, kind of thing. And those more kind of fitness-focused wearables, they're more designed for, hey, when Chris wants to go out there and pretend like he's a runner for a little bit. They're very good at looking at Chris, keeping track of his mile average, that kind of stuff. When you get into the safety world, of course, hey, we want to be paying attention to more safety-focused metrics, kind of thing. Then underneath this bucket of safety wearables, of course, that can mean a whole lot of things. So that would, of course, be things like gas monitors that you guys see out there in the field. You guys are using those. Seeing a lot of different, temperature sensors out there for sure. On the personal side, see more kind of ergonomics type of wearables. Of course, the distinction, I just grouped them here, kind of the environment, looking at the environment. Hey, how are things doing here? Personal side, hey, looking at that individual. How is that individual performing? And then even underneath that, safety wearables, that personal side, kind of depending on exactly what that wearable is offering, you really tend to see it in two big buckets. These are some $10,000 words right here, but you think about electrocardiography as being kind of like that little chest strap solution right there. That's going to be an electrical pulse that comes across. And then you think about the photoplethysmography. That's really that's in our world. You're thinking about even like a pulse oximeter. I got a little picture right there. But here's where you're going to shoot light onto the skin, and you're going to read the reflectance of that light. There's also, I don't know if I've ever actually seen one out in the field, particularly in the safety space, but you can also do it with sound. Sound's also one of those things. And really that's kind of, that's what you're doing. Whatever that medium is with those big words, you're providing some type of signal across some type of surface, and you're reading the impact of that signal on the other side. And of course, I kind of just crossed out the things that we're not talking about. So here, that's a good looking finger right there, isn't it? There you can see, I think we got them on the next slide right here. Kind of the basics of what this PPG sensor is all about. So, this technology, this is the same technology that you're going to see on like an Apple Watch, Fitbit. It's going to be that flickering green light that you see. There have been a lot of good advances recently. Even us internally, we're doing a lot of really cool things where you're sending some different wavelengths out, and you're getting some different information, which is actually super exciting stuff. But when it comes down to it, it's really three main components. It's going to be, hey, you're going to have a transmitter, you're going to have a light source, you're going to have a receiver to kind of see what's happening, and then you're going to have some kind of device that's going to get that information out, so that they can be further analyzed. I did keep a QR code right there if anybody's interested to at least one of our studies. We have a number of studies that are out there. You guys can check them out on the website for sure. We can give them to you after today's call. But very frequently we get questions around like, hey, does that thing actually work? Kind of an idea. And I'll highlight it a little bit more when we talk about kind of the IoT framework. But in our world, what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide awareness. We're trying to, on these, across all these facilities, across all these workers, we're just trying to wave our hands, programmatically, of course, and say, hey, come take a look at this person over here, kind of an idea. And that's the name of the game in these scenarios where we're just trying to solve these problems. We're trying to bring awareness to them, trying to solve them on that lowest possible level. So you can get somebody, a subject matter expert on site Maybe a supervisor, it could be someone, any number of people that can actually make some kind of impact. They need to be provided the information. So that's really what we're trying to do. Oh, perfect. So I thought it would be interesting to just kind of walk through a little framework here. Hopefully give you guys some tools to take forward after this call. Hopefully it's not too boring to you. But when you think about, how does this stuff actually work out in the field, kind of an idea, it's important to understand like how it works everywhere. So when you think about an IoT solution, which wearables in many instances are going to be that, definitely in the SlateSafety world, you kind of break it up into these very small pieces. I try to make it super easy. We're going to build on this framework here, and then when we walk through some case studies, I'll kind of highlight again, how that framework takes place. But when it comes down to it, this is all you're trying to do. You're trying to take some information from the environment, from the world. You're trying to gather that. You're going to move that information somewhere so that it can be processed. So maybe it can be added, subtracted, combined with something else. And then you're going to provide some type of output information based off of that. When you think about IoT, there's a lot of different frameworks out there. I try to meld a couple of them here into this kind of 4-layer framework right here. Hopefully this makes some good sense. But taking a good, kind of silly example with that as our baseline framework. Here's some kind of more technical terms for it, but walking through this example hopefully is going to bring it home. Some of you guys probably already guessed what this framework's actually trying to do right here, but I have a couple of kids at the house, and now these kids are fantastic. They're fantastic for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is that they're just constantly out there learning, and you live in this world long enough, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot what it means to kind of go through this evolution. But thinking about one of these children, one of these kids out there, this is kind of the classic example of, hey, there's a hot stove, there's a hot pan. Dad can sit there and tell them all day, hey, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. But they're not going to know until they actually touch it. So using that as an example, you can think about the child that goes up there, they touch that stove, they're reaching for that cookie, whatever it is, and they get burnt. So that interaction with the environment, in this case, the perception layer is going to be the kid's hand. That's a sensor, of course. You're going to send that information through your nerves. You guys probably remember that nerve drawing from 8th grade biology. And then that information is going to go somewhere to get processed. Of course, in this silly example, it's going to be the brain. It goes to the kid's brain. The brain's like, hey, what the heck was that? Kind of an idea. And then it starts classifying it, starts thinking about it. Hey, that wasn't good. That wasn't a snow cone. That wasn't the cookie. That hurt. And then the application layer, that's going to be the interface, the output layer. Of course, that's going to be the kid screaming, hey, Dad, why didn't you tell me? Kind of an idea. And like, oh, here we go, kind of thing. But this framework right here is very beneficial when you're thinking about those tools, those sensors, those wearables that are out at your facility and how they actually interact with the world around them. So again, building on this framework, thinking about it, this IoT space, the Internet of Things, of course, probably glossed over that, but in these industrial settings that I know you guys are a part of, you can think about the IIoT. So that, of course, is just the industrial Internet of Things. And then you think about it more in this safety world, that we're most interested in today. You can take that same kind of framework, understand that same framework. So over there on the left side, these are a couple of sensors you guys are probably familiar with. You guys, probably even using at your facilities right now. These are going to be sensors that are deployed, wearable technology that's deployed at our facilities. Those are going to be our perception, our sensing layers as we're out there. We have these warehouses with however many hundreds of people. We got these plants with however many people. We got these facilities that got a couple people in it. Whatever it is. Then we're going to interact with that. Those sensors are going to provide information. They're going to, of course, transfer that information through this, what we call the network layer. And now this is where you start to add some really cool stuff right here. Depending on the scenario, depending on what kind of environment you guys are working in, what the best technology for that tool could be a number of things. These are some that you're probably familiar with right there. Bluetooth, cellular. LoRa, something that you're seeing more and more out there. LoRa's nice for kind of longer distances. It's good for penetrating some of these industrial facilities you guys are familiar with. Wi-Fi. All these types of things out there. But you're just trying to get that information somewhere so that it can be processed. And again, oftentimes in this IoT, in this wearable space, this IoT framework, it's going to be in some cloud somewhere. Could be certainly somewhere else. And these are the kind of the big ones that you guys already know. But there's a lot of cloud providers out there. But when you think about these big data centers that are going up all over the place, it's going to be one of these big guys for sure. And then get that information to some kind of application that can be interfaced with. Oftentimes, this is that app that I open up on my phone, check things, see how things are going. We're talking about the IIoT space here, but think about like I got the kids at home. You got the baby monitors. That's an IoT device. I'm opening up that application, seeing things, setting configurations with it. But this is also where I'm receiving information. I'm receiving the notifications. I'm receiving that type of information that I can go make an impact with in the real world. And then, of course, you can see a couple of examples over there on the right side, but plenty more out there. All right. Well, perfect. So that's kind of, we walked through kind of some of the technology. I thought this framework here was pretty cool to show off. As we kind of build on it, we're going to layer some things on. But that's just the technology side. Now, you guys that are on this call, there's probably a reason that you're on this call. You guys are interested in this type of technology. You guys are trying to evaluate if it's something that you guys could use at your facility. You're trying to see if it could work for you. You're trying to see what's out there, types of things. And that's basically, hey, we're trying to create, some type of change. So we mentioned some of those tools that, that are near and dear to our hearts. They've been out there for a good while. We're familiar with them. We know them. But if we want to create some change, we of course have to. We have a current state that we're a part of, and then we're trying to get to some kind of future state. And that future state could perhaps be the investigation of this technology. So this framework that I'm going to walk through right here, this one's nice because although the backdrop is wearable technology and some of the stuff that we've seen, this framework could be any single project that you guys have ever implemented. It's going to be a lot of common sense stuff for sure, but it's a nice reminder of hey, these are some things that I want to be mindful of as we're trying to implement something. Okay, so again, this is one model. There's a couple of different models out here, but this is a model that we use internally on the SlateSafety that makes a whole lot of sense for us. This is a model that can be adopted to certainly other scenarios for sure. But when we think about, hey, we want to implement some tool, something, some new solution, there's going to be a number of different stakeholders that are involved in that evolution, that evaluation of implementation. So, some of you guys might have heard like the old, hey, well, even on this presentation, like, hey, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them, kind of an idea. So this idea of kind of reinforcing things as they go, that's super important. But when you think about implementing a tool like a wearable technology or anything else, oftentimes you're going to have a couple of different buckets. You're going to think about, hey, the worker, hey, the person that's, the actual boots on the ground person. It's not their job to be wearing technology. It's their job to be laying concrete, operating on the floor. That's their job. So you got to be able to take that into account, understand their goals, understand, their problems, all those types of things. And make sure that a tool that's being deployed to them it's going to enable them. It's not going to hinder them. Now that individual, that specific person, that's actually going to be out on the floor, out in the facility, out at the site, whatever it is, that mindset is going to be a little bit different than the individuals that are at kind of that leadership, that management level. And of course, that could be like supervisors, that could be foremen, that could be any type of manager leadership at kind of this site level. Those goals for the people at that level, they're going to be different. They're a little more, they're higher level. They're more concerned with the numbers to a certain degree, but they're still in that world. So understanding what's important to them as a solution gets deployed, very, very important. Make sure that we have the buy-in for that. And then finally, you can kind of think about the big picture. This is kind of the company, right? This is the enterprise. This is a collection, of course, of the different sites, the different facilities, the different groups. And those sites, facilities, groups, those are filled up by those individual workers. And I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know, but they got a different set of goals. They got a different set of requirements, different things that people that sit in those positions need to be equipped with, need to be enabled by to be successful. So thinking about all three of those, when we take a click down and understand like, all right, hey, we have some wearable technology, understanding that wearable technology and how we might be interested in deploying it to them. These are some things that we often see, again, being specific, deploying this type of technology that we might see. It's just like what you think, like, the worker, and we all know this, like the worker's like, all right, what in the heck are they thinking? Why am I doing this? What are those people up in the ivory towers thinking right here? And it's just like you would think, and I know you guys have experienced this in your world, but it's like, why are we doing this? How is this going to impact me? What's in it for me? Kind of an idea. But you also start to see some other questions, and this kind of little introduction right here. You also start to see some questions about like, general privacy kind of things. Again, specific. This is specific to the wearable space for sure, and technology in general, really. Who's seeing this data? What are they doing with it? Am I going to be punished for something? Kind of an idea. And I'll talk about them here, kind of here, but you can see it over there to the right side. These concerns, a lot of these concerns, you can kind of group them up into two big buckets, like the utility of the device, what's the device doing for these individuals, these stakeholders right here, and then how trustworthy, can the person, can the groups of people, can they trust what this device is doing? It says that it's going to do this thing. Can it actually do this thing? Come up to that site level. I know you guys are probably thinking about these exact same questions right here. Like, hey, I think it's a pretty cool idea. My leadership thinks it's a pretty cool idea, but will the workers actually use it? And we could probably all point back to some projects that had fantastic intentions. They seemed so great, but then when it came to actually deploying it, there wasn't any appetite for it. It didn't work for some reason. The workers didn't want it. It didn't work for a number of reasons. How do we plan to use this data? At that kind of like that leadership, that management level, kind of at the site, good, very important questions to ask. The accuracy, again, is it trustworthy? How difficult is it? These types of things. I was actually just on a call this morning and somebody asked me about alternatives to SlateSafety kind of a thing. So the evaluation of that next best alternative, what could we do with this money? What could we do with, better data, different data, all those things go into play. And then finally at kind of that enterprise level, just to kind of round it out, hey, we got a different set of problems. This is going to be more things like, a lot of these would be, like maybe like IT considerations for wearable technology, certainly privacy considerations, exposure to these types of things. But then it's also like, hey, we just spent a whole lot of money on this technology. Are people even using it right? Is it being used to the, are we getting the biggest ROI for this solution? So I'm sure you guys are going through it and you guys are thinking about like, okay, we're interested in this technology. I encourage you guys to make sure that we're keeping mindful of all the people that are going to be involved in these projects. And it's no secret that when we see success in deploying our technology, but it's it could be any tool out there. When you see success deploying a tool, it's really going to be these types of buckets, these people, these stakeholders that are going to be lockstep. They're going to be aligned. They're all going to be marching in the right direction. Well, perfect. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. And now, just a couple more. We're going to actually jump into a couple of looks in practice. Obviously it's we want you guys are here, like, hey, tell us if this thing's really working, kind of an idea. Tell us how we could use it. Tell us, how it could be deployed at our facility. Every facility is a little bit different, for sure. I brought up a couple of case studies right here that we can walk through and we can just talk about. But there's definitely more on the website if you guys are interested. And again, kind of like what I said at the top, if you guys want to talk more, see if this could work for you. It's just a quick conversation. So here's going to be one that we're going to look at. So this facility, or this organization right here, this is an indoor facility. I thought could be good. I guess I kind of split it up that way. So this is an indoor facility that we're walking through right here. The next one's going to be an outdoor facility. But this is a large food manufacturer. They have a number of different operating sites in the United States, really in the world. And they have two particular facilities here in the United States that are interesting. And their whole thing is like, hey, kind of thinking back to like, where we're using this technology, kind of an idea. Hey, we have workers that need to go in and perform maintenance. They need to perform repairs. They need to clean a particular piece of equipment. Think about these large, multiple story dryers that you guys seen. You guys probably have some of those at your facility. We have to periodically go in there and make sure things are good. We have to clean them up. Like I said, it's a very, very physically demanding activity. They're wearing heavy PPE. It's really a it's the exact use case for this idea of wearable technology, physiological monitoring, keeping track of heat stress. As the workers go in there, they're going to wear a SlateSafety device. They're going to work. But just kind of going back to our framework, those individuals are going to perform activities, and once they reach a certain level, there's going to be that notification that's generated. So that notification is going to provide it to the worker. It's going to enable them like, hey, you just triggered one of these alerts within the tool. It's also going to be sent out to any outside officials that need it. So again, think about our different stakeholders, thinking about our IoT framework. That information is going to move from those individuals that are in there performing that activity, and then alerting on them in case they go above one of those predetermined thresholds. And of course, inside the platform, there's a number of different ways that you can evaluate, hey, is this tool working? Here's this idea of corrective actions right here, these interventions that are occurring. So inside the data, you can, of course, see like, hey, somebody's working. There's a notification that's generated, and then you can see what happens next in the data. Does that individual that receives that notification, do they just kind of go right through it? Do they get closer and closer to this area, this level, this threshold that we feel uncomfortable with? Or do you see an actual change in the behavior? Do you see something actually occur? And you can see that in the data. And you can group that data up, and you can make some really, or you can glean some really important insights. So if you're constantly seeing that plant one, when they perform this particular type of activity in this particular area, you can see them just kind of blowing through these alerts. Okay, that might be a good opportunity for an intervention of some additional training. Hey, are people just not feeling the alerts? Is the alert set too low? Have we had any problems? Do we just need to communicate what needs to happen? Maybe they don't have access to any of those administrative controls that we've documented. And you can actually map that. You can see that trend occur, over day to day. Of course, you can see it, week to week, month to month, season to season, work evolution to work evolution. And then you can start to better layer in like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this type of work during this type of day. Maybe we can switch things around. Maybe we can have more access to, those the shade, the cool tent, whatever it is to make an impact. Perfect. And now, just kind of bringing this home, just kind of going back to our IoT framework, just to kind of make it a little more tangible. So in these scenarios, the workers out in the dryer, they're wearing a SlateSafety device, they're wearing a wearable. That is, of course, the perception layer. And then from that perception layer, we're getting some really cool information. That information is being sent, in this case, it's actually being utilized in two technologies, Bluetooth and cellular. And that information is going to the SlateSafety cloud, as you would expect. And then anybody with, anybody that's authorized to view that information, they can see data in real time. They can administer, administer thresholds. They can make set configurations, run reports. But perhaps the most interesting thing is that they can create a workflow so that the right individual that needs to receive that notification can receive it and then make that real world impact. Worker 10, they went above some threshold. Worker 10 felt that alert. That alert was also sent to Worker 10 supervisor. Worker 10 supervisor is just saying, hey, Worker 10, did you get that alert? You good? And Worker 10 says, yep, I'm stepping out right now. Going to go take a break for a little bit. And then, of course, you can actually, like I said earlier, you can see the data. Once Worker 10 falls below a particular threshold, they can then return back to that work. And, of course, you can kind of start things again. But it's really that idea of bringing that information to the right people at the right time to solve, or mitigate any type of, activity that was starting to get to a threshold. They can do that and solve those things. Perfect. So that was an indoor facility. This next one's going to be an outdoor facility. And maybe there's some chat going on, but you guys will probably have some indoor facilities that you guys are working at. You guys probably have some outdoor facilities. Some of you guys are probably in charge or overseeing probably both, kind of an idea. And really the scenario is still the same. Hey, we have a group of individuals. They're performing some type of activity. They're working in hot environments. They're wearing heavy PPE. They're doing a physically demanding activity. Maybe some combination of all three of those. They're working in those conditions that we mentioned earlier that are really setting the table. These individuals at this particular site. So this is more or less a large construction site right here. So in this particular little snippet right here, these individuals are performing construction. You can see them right there on the screen, wearing that heavy PPE right there. It's kind of one of these nasty, environments. And look, they got to do some very physically demanding work. You can see in this particular project, that's some type of pump. I have no idea what exactly it is, but they needed to go in and replace these pumps. So they needed to take out these old pumps. Of course, take every precautionary step before, take out these pumps, and then prime the area, get the area ready to receive these new pumps right here. So very labor intensive, very physically demanding work. But oh, by the way, you had to wear all this heavy PPE for safety. So these individuals, and this is a site located in the southern United States. So these individuals are of course going to be hit with everything that the South loves to throw at you, kind of an idea. They're wearing the impermeables. It's going to be super important to keep an eye on these guys and gals as they're out there performing that activity. This is a very nice use case of wearable technology, particularly at the individual level. Sometimes with that, kind of think back to that technology step. Sometimes the environmental conditions totally fine. We could use that for these types of activities. You kind of, if you can go straight to the individual to show how the individual is doing, that's exactly what you want to do right there. So each one of these individuals would be wearing a wearable underneath the PPE. You think back to our technology stack. They're wearing the device. It's interfacing with the individual, getting that information. That information is being sent up through that network layer. It's getting sent to that processing layer. It's getting sent to that application layer. So anybody authorized to view this information, of course, they would have access to it. They can see things in real time. But most importantly, they're going to see any of those alert thresholds that are generated when those individuals hit some level that this organization felt uncomfortable with. So here, looking at some of the data right here. This is last year's data. So you can see on that top chart right there, you can see the number of person hours that were generated per day for this particular work evolution, this particular work project. You can see, of course, the days, right there. And then at the bottom one, you can actually see the alerts per day on here. So again, the alerts are going to be those notifications that this organization feels, hey, we want to know when this happens. And when this happens, that's going to be, you can kind of see it over there. When this threshold for these individuals is met, trigger a notification. So you can see again, kind of the top, the number of hours that were worked per day right there. And then the bottom, you can see the alert thresholds, the alerts that were generated. And you can see that big spike that occurred right there, February 23rd. 118 alerts were generated in about 20 21 hours worth of activity. Of course, spread amongst different people. Now, the interesting thing, and this is actually exactly what we're striving to do here. The interesting thing is that as the work continues, and you can see it, there was another big spike, of course, on March 8th, right there. But a lot of this work is very similar, and the work's changing a little bit. The workers are not changing. Same group of workers out there, but you can see the alerts per day. It's a big drop off right there, and the reason for that is kind of thinking back to our buckets for our individuals, our change, thinking back to our IoT framework, is that those individuals, of course, they're receiving alerts. The data is getting seen. It's bringing awareness, getting that information to the right people at the right time, so that they can solve these problems before they escalate too much. So if somebody hits one of those alerts, they back down, and then what happens is, of course, look, these are smart people out there. Like, hey, I don't want to generate another alert. Let me better pace myself. Or the leadership saying, hey, we don't want to generate all these alerts again. Let's switch some things around so that we can better administer this work evolution. And the outcome is exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for basically none of these individuals wearing the device were sent to medical for treatment. That's kind of the name of the game. That's exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for a tool that can change behavior. You're looking for a tool that can provide information and that can enable the people on site to make more informed decisions. And then, just kind of the same thing again, just kind of going back to our framework for right there. Hey, we have the individuals, they're performing the activities, working. They're using a wearable in this case to provide information, SlateSafety device. In this case, most of this work was done, it's just enabled through cellular, so straight from the device directly to the cloud for processing. Once it got to the application layer, of course, again, that's where the cool stuff can happen on it, and then those notifications that I mentioned. So hopefully, those are two good examples right there. Hopefully, try to provide kind of that indoor-outdoor idea. I know every environment's a little bit different. Every every type of work's a little bit different. Every industry is a little bit different. Really, the wearables are just another tool to help kind of administer the program that you guys are already working with. So that's kind of it. Hopefully that was interesting to you guys. Hopefully we saw some cool stuff in there. But just kind of wrapping up, what did we talk about there? Again, we hit the basics. It's that time of year again for sure. Just getting the toolbox talks, warmed up, getting them ready. Just wanted to review some of the basics, some of the tools you guys are already out there using, which is fantastic. There's no one tool that's going to do everything for sure. We introduced, wearable technology in the stack could sit. Talked a little bit about, how a PPG sensor for wearable technology would work when you're particularly looking at physiological monitoring. Introduced the IoT framework there. Hopefully that was something interesting for you guys. Hopefully that made sense to you. It wasn't too silly. And then, of course, deploying change, implementing a change. Wearable technology is a change. Like I said before, this is still a new technology in these industrial spaces, in these spaces where people really need the most wearable technology. It's still coming online. Of course, those things associated with that. And then finally, just went through a couple of real world examples, hopefully kind of just to drive it home, just to kind of show you that, success is out there for sure. And hopefully that made sense. And I guess with that, I think, just thank you guys for joining. I certainly got time for a couple of questions if there are any. And then, again, if you guys had any interest in trying out this technology, SlateSafety, we do offer a free 30-day pilot. You can use that QR code right there, come to the website, send me an email, whatever you guys would like. We can certainly help you guys out. Just kind of talk to you guys, see if it could work for you. And that could be it. Other than that, Mr. Dan, I think I'd turn it back over to you. And that's it for me.
Chris, thank you. I failed to mention this at the beginning, so I want to say it now. I want to thank SlateSafety for being one of the sponsors for the summit as well. It's because of our sponsors that we're able to keep this free and open to everyone. So thank you to Slate Safety for that. And Chris, thank you for that presentation. I loved it. And I think everybody else did as well. It looks like we do have a question in here. So I'll read it out to you. It says, and this is from Cameron. It says, I'm a strong advocate for the integration of wearable technology in the workplace. I do have one question that might be tough, but curious if you have heard any chatter. I'm curious about the evolving legal landscape surrounding wearables, particularly in light of the recent EEOC guidance. Do you anticipate changes in the industry regarding the types of data collected, as well as this data, how this data is stored or reported to the employer, and or hidden from the employer? Just curious.
That is a super important question, and like it might have been buried in kind of that framework that I put up on the screen. But that's something that we hear that all the time. I mean, that happens on call number one, and it makes sense. Like if anybody if an employer hands over something, hey, wear this, it's going to be for your safety, kind of an idea, and you're like, the hair on your back of your neck should go up for sure. Now, in the SlateSafety, I haven't actually seen the latest documentation on that you mentioned, but it could be good for us to check it out for sure. In the SlateSafety world, we really, the balance is kind of what hidden in there is kind of that utility trust. It's really this idea of privacy and safety, finding the right balance for the right job at the right facility, at the right company, in the right industry, and that's a tricky thing to do for sure. In the SlateSafety world, we try to offer some different ways that people can accomplish that, and they can accomplish that not just at that specific company, but at that company that might have different job roles performing different job functions. So, if I'm moving uranium rods every day, I mean, I don't take all my information. I just want to be safe, kind of an idea. Whereas that other side, where like I'm at a lower risk. I'm in a lower risk job role. Probably, maybe the water shade rest is good enough for me, and then everything in between. So you can kind of think of that continuum, kind of scooting more towards that individual that's carrying the uranium rods, and then kind of back off a little bit. In the SlateSafety platform, you can de-identify the information, which is a very important thing to do when you kind of think about these conversations. That usually goes a long way when we're talking to privacy attorneys or unions or people that are concerned about that aspect. And then you can kind of take it even a step further. There's different things inside the SlateSafety platform. More than happy to show those at another time. But hey, we're not actually going to collect the biometrics. We're only going to generate alerts if something happens, if somebody goes over a threshold. There's like an alert only mode. Then there's a no biometric mode. Then it's like only certain things are available. And of course, that isn't just like a SlateSafety. That isn't just a wearable type of thing, but that's like any tool. Like anytime an employer is looking to implement some kind of project, kind of goes again in those buckets that I described. Those people up at the enterprise level, they have different ideas, they have a different mindset, they have different goals for what they're trying to accomplish, as opposed to that worker that's down, who's actually going to be wearing it. And finding that balance internally is certainly important, and certainly something that SlateSafety, is trying to provide that balance. That's a really good question.
Yeah, Cameron, great question. Before we wrap it up, we'll give it a second to see if there's any more questions that come in. But as we do that, I want to leave this slide up just so everybody has a chance to scan the QR code, either take a picture of the slide, grab Chris's information. And while we do that, I just also want to say one more time, Chris, thank you to you. Thank you to SlateSafety. We wouldn't be able to put on a summit like this without people like you and companies like SlateSafety who are willing to support this. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having us.
I'm looking forward to for doing this again next year already. So at this point, it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. So with that being said, I guess you must have covered everything that people needed to have answered. So I thought that again that was a great session. I had a lot of takeaways from that, and I hope everyone did as well. So since we have no other questions, I guess what we can wrap this up. Chris, thank you again to you, to SlateSafety, and we do have one more session today that is at. Let me just double check here. It'll be coming up at 2 o'clock with Tracy from Cold Vest. So I hope to see everybody there. And once again, Chris, thank you again for your time and energy today that you put into this.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Great, everyone. I'll see you later today at 2 o'clock.